Hey everyone, Walter Bowne here, talking about Huckleberry Finn and Don Quixote, two amazing novels that we're going to associate with. Sorry about my jacket, it's a little cold in the room, so I'm just being a little sporty here with my Hilfiger jacket. Okay, the influence of Don Quixote on Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Alright, so the Spanish writer Cervantes wrote what is known in the West as the first novel, Don Quixote de la Mancha, or The Adventures of Don Quixote. He was a contemporary of William Shakespeare. They actually died on the same day, April 23rd, 1616. There's some indication that Shakespeare may have been, towards the end of his career, aware of Cervantes. Some works that do not exist, really. Just we think that perhaps some of his stories or plays, his plays may have been influenced by Cervantes. But really, Cervantes, William Shakespeare, poet, playwright. He did not write novels, right? Cervantes wrote what we consider the first novel, right? In Japan, I think it was called The Tale of Genji is the first novel. But in the West, in Europe, it's this novel, Don Quixote, The Adventures of Don Quixote, which you should definitely read. It's long, but read it. And if you could read it in the original Spanish, I'd be impressed, right? And also, Senora Reina would be impressed. All right, so here we have very famous man of La Mancha. All right, we have Don Quixote on his famous steed. Okay, he thinks he's a big kind of horse rider, but of course the horse is not that strong. And here we are in La Mancha, which is central Spain. All right, this is like Barcelona, Catalonia area, the Basque region of Spain. Down here is the Costa del Sol, Toledo, those areas. Toledo's up here. Sevilla down here, and of course the very famous windmills of La Mancha, like around Toledo. If you can get to this area, it's fantastic. I was mostly in northern Spain. I've never been to this area of Spain, which is on my bucket list. All right, let's talk about, and make sure you get this definition down, of a picaresque novel. The word picaro in Spanish means a rogue. A rogue is someone who is kind of bad but lovable, right? Think of Bart Simpson. He's bad, but he's lovable. We have these types of figures that are rough, uneducated, or maybe even a little educated, but a bit of a rogue. A rogue, and they go on a bunch of adventures. So the word novel stems from the European languages, from the word roman. That's where we get the word romance, like medieval romances. Novella is Italian for a new little thing. So the word fiction stems from the Latin fictio, F-I-C-T-I-O, which means a counterfeit. So make sure you know these definitions. When we talk about a novel, it is a long work of fiction, which is a counterfeit of real life. We will be reading nonfiction, which is not a novel, that's a book. All fiction, all novels are books, but not all books are fiction, right? So here we have, so Don Quixote is a rogue who travels throughout La Mancha of Spain on romantic escapades, thinking he is a knight errant. He reads all these books thinking this is truth. It's not truth. It's just fantasy. It's romances, right? It's fun to pass the time. He takes it literally and wants to become one of these knights because he's single, he's old, he just does not want to live the type of life he's living. He wants to imagine grandeur. He's simply an old man who has read way too many romantic stories and yearns for glory. Cervantes satirizes the influence of books on impressionable readers. I was an impressionable reader. I read On the Road by Jack Kerouac. So my friends and I, Alec and Steve, we get in my car, we drive out west on a crazy 2-week adventure, all because I read one book. Or I read Ernest Hemingway's Sun Also Rises. So what do? I go over to France, I go down to Spain, and just trying to recreate The Sun Also Rises. Again, very impressionable. Books have this influence on us that we read it and now we want to not be in Voorhees. I now want to go to Paris. I now want to go across the country and go to Colorado. But think about how a book has influenced you. So Cervantes is able to satirize much of Spanish civilization by having Don Quixote and his bro, the servant Sancho Panza, travel throughout the region meeting various scoundrels. They will meet various people on their episodic adventures. That's another thing I want you to know about an episodic novel. This is an episode. It has one episode, then we go to another episode, then we have another episode. So it's relatively, I wouldn't say easy to write, but as a writer myself, if I know I have this scene, then I'm finished. Then I want to move to a next scene. All right? Not every novel is episodic. Right? Many miniseries or things are episodic. They're in episodes, like Game of Thrones. Here's an episode, here's an episode. And it's like it's a self-contained unit. Right? So Huckleberry Finn is like this too, right? As we'll see. But you can criticize aspects of society from the high ranking to the low ranking and everywhere in between, the merchant class, all the different classes in between, all the very different jobs, by having these two like crazy characters travel throughout Spain. And it's a great way to offer commentary about what's happening at that time, just like Mark Twain did in Huckleberry Finn. All right, we get the word quixotic from the novel. All right, it means foolishly impractical, especially in the pursuit of ideals, marked by rash, lofty romantic ideals or extravagantly chivalrous action. All right, so if you have this crazy idea that you're going to do, and someone says that is so quixotic, that comes from this novel, because here we have a guy who's foolishly chasing these romantic dreams of being a knight and chivalry, right? This is long, 1600s. That's about 600 years old by now, right? So that way of thinking is really outdated. Don Quixote, wants to go back to a time when there was valor and chivalric love, and you did everything for one woman. The one woman he loves more than anyone else is Dulcinea del Toboso, right? All right, Sancho Panza is smarter than Don Quixote, right? But he stays with him out of love and devotion, even though Don Quixote abuses him, right? There's no reason why he should go along with with Don Quixote, except he's devoted, right? We oftentimes have, especially in cartoons, we have the big dog and the little dog, right? Well, he's sort of like the little dog who's actually smarter than the big dog, right? So we get a lot of comedy in there. And he stays with him even though he knows Don Quixote is crazy. Don Quixote is crazy, right? And we have two strong archetypes here. The essential buddy novel. This is a buddy novel, just like Huckleberry Finn. They're opposites, right? Jim is a runaway slave. Huck is a white male, right? He's committing a crime, helping a slave escape deeper into the South, right? Which is ironic. All right, so here we have the opposites, tall and thin, black and white, and they play off each other very well like a yin and yang. Okay, here we have some very famous silhouettes of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. If you go to Spain, these are like their cultural icons, right? We have, Babe Ruth, we have Huck and Jim, they have Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, right? Many, many statues throughout Spain dedicated to this wonderful work, one of the greatest works of Western literature. And again, please read Adventures of Don Quixote. All right, we have the famous scene of him fighting windmills. All right, Don Quixote does everything to appeal to his great love, Dulcinea del Toboso, a woman he has never talked to, right? She doesn't even really appear in the novel. He just has this ideal, and he goes after it. He fights giants on her behalf, which he confuses as windmills. He sees these as windmills, so he fights them. It's funny, it's sad, but don't we all fight windmills, that we fight things that aren't really real. And because truth is not reality sometimes, right? We think, no, that our feelings are facts, that we see something as a villain, but it's not really a villain. That teacher who you think is out to get you, that you try to attack or you go against, it's just your way of thinking, and it's often sometimes wrong, right? It's just a windmill. It's just a teacher. He's trying to teach. It's not a giant out to get you. And of course, we can tie this all in very nicely to the great American work of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. We have adventures, and it's just episodic, right? We have Huck and Jim on crazy adventures. They get into trouble, they get out of trouble, and they meet people who are they're scoundrels. They're just awful, awful people that Mark Twain can then satirize. The two feuding families that kill each other. That's not funny, but it's funny. Buck and Huck, they're the doppelgangers, all right? They're the opposites of each other, right? The Duke and the Dolphin and the Swindlers and all these different people he meets. Huck and Jim on their way to, freedom, which ironically is going down the south. All right, so of course this parallels with Huckleberry Finn. We have various scoundrels. Twain then can satirize large segments of society, and we'll be looking at maybe 10 to 12 different targets of Twain's satire in Huckleberry Finn. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.